Okay, welcome back to um, after a long gap, Entropy, one of the longest episode that we're going to record, and it is going to be filled with the new information. And I think today's topic we'll start from MCP, uh, Model Context Protocol. That's what we are thinking of discussing. But before that, let us catch up with Mr. Nishant and understand what is happening in the AI world.
Thanks for reminding the name of the podcast again. Yeah. Oh, not much. No, not really much. I never didn't play with MCP. Uh, Heard about it, watching videos about it, talks about it, but never got a chance to play with it. Be really good to see, good to hear from you what it is and how does it help. Otherwise, I've been like extremely busy at work on AI projects, but then no real chance to look at what's progressing, what's cutting edge. What about you?
Okay. Yeah, I've been there are a lot of innovation hackathons which are happening. So we were planning a lot of ideas around AI solutions, and so I was working on a kind of a air-gapped LLM conversational agent which will help in installation procedure. During that time, I started looking into LangChain, which led me into LangGraph. Then eventually somebody told this has to be an MCP server. Then I attended an MCP course. So it kind of gave me an insight into what all things we have and where to use what kind of a insight. And I think we can discuss that in this
Ah, good. Yeah,
most
because you
probably.
told me that we'll talk about MCP, I also had a look at the same course, deeplearning.ai. It takes us 1.5 hours to complete. And, I think we should put it in the chat as well in a way that everyone should take this course. It's just 1.5 hours, gives you a lot of insights into what we can do. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. So I'll start with an example. So when you think of what solution that you wanted to create about using AI, everybody would start with something like I want to build a workflow engine or I want to build a agentic solution. So I started on similar direction. Um, I initially was, playing around with Python. Then I learned there is a, framework called as LangChain, using which you can abstract out a lot of boilerplate code that you have to write for calling LLM and creating, workflows and all. So I tried a very basic LangChain workflow, and it was very useful. And another thing that I found is using um, Llama or Llama framework. Llama is a framework that you can install, and it comes with a lot of models inbuilt, and you can pull and run it on your local Mac. So I pulled Tiny Llama and ran it on my Mac. I started conversing with it just like any other AI model on terminal. You don't need any interface for that, and that was an eye-opening insight for me. But it quickly came down because further development using multiple prompt template made me realize that this does not work like OpenAI model or any other model. Even if you use complex prompt
What do you
plates.
exactly? You install something directly from your Mac, go to your terminal, just install something directly.
No, so um, I'm working with a product company, so they have a very published online URL where documentation of installation and procedure is there. So I
Okay.
wanted this to be used as an assistant. So what it would do is it would chat. I mean, person who want to do something will interact with the AI model. It will tell I want help in installing this particular product. Then what happens is if it finds that particular keyword of that product, it goes to the bookmarked URL of documentation. It takes the entire URL, a text, and marks it and then sends it to LLM, then gets a summary. And also, I wanted it to be arranged in a particular format, the summary. For example, it has to be given a prerequisite, bullet points, and then a short summary of what how to install. Because this had a very huge documentation, so I thought this would help. This is where I started. So obviously, to get this particular format of summary, I created a very complicated prompt template and I put it into LangChain and I called Tiny Llama and then I tried to execute it. It started giving me random results and I was wondering what happened. And later, after a few days of work, I realized Tiny Llama is not that powerful. It does not understand all the prompt templates, so you cannot expect it to work. If you ask them any simple, straightforward question, it will answer. So I made the prompt template to extremely simple. I just asked it to summarize it. Then it started giving me the right answer. So that made me realize like, you need to understand the model that you're dealing with and then understand the pros and cons and then make a solution around it if you have a dependency of any model. For me, the reason why I'm using this on a local because I thought if you don't want to send out information to open internet and you wanted an air gap system where you have this installed in a VM and or a itself and then you can do it there, I thought it will be much more helpful. But that's a learning from LangChain. One thing I realized is boilerplate code of calling models and putting prompts and tools is very easy because LangChain abstracts it. And if you have multiple workflows, you can link multiple chains together and then you can invoke it together so that it does a workflow. So if you're not doing agentic, if you're just doing a workflow, then LangChain is extremely simple to use and powerful, and you should try it out. Then I started learning LangGraph. That is where I realized for most of the agentic workflows, you need LangGraph. Um, but while doing that, I got a review comment stating that, why don't you do an MCP server? Then I was thinking, why did the person who gave me a review comment thought that this has to be an MCP server? Then I'm like, I went back and started learning it. I think that's where we'll start this conversation. So I had few notes on the same, um, you know, course that you did. I put it in a notebook. Thanks to deeplearning.ai for sharing this. And since it is a free course, I hope they don't have an issue in sharing this publicly, but I have screenshots from there. Okay, I hope you can see my screen.
Yeah, yeah. I found the first one very interesting. Yeah, the first one, you three blocks you put here, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. You want to zoom
so,
in a little bit?
yes.
Yeah, let's go. Yeah, this is good.
Okay, so, one of the questions that everybody would ask is, is
How's it different from
MCP,
API?
yeah, is it replacing REST interface or not? So this
Yeah.
is the answer to that. It does not. REST standardizes web application interaction. LSP, standardization of IDE interacting with specific tools. And MCP is standardization of how AI application would interact. So it's an abstraction on top of abstraction on top of
Mm.
the latest, tool. So
Yeah, there's a one point to add here. So I was listening to this podcast, Latent Space podcast, and everyone interested in AI engineering, I would say, listen to it. It's super cool. They got this creator of MCP. I forgot his name, Mahesh, someone from Anthropic, and he and the product manager both joined this podcast, and they were really talking about what's the inspiration behind MCP, and they really quoted they were inspired quite a bit from the LSP from Microsoft. And so LSP is a similar abstraction on edge IDEs specifically, right? To IDEs to interact with different kind of languages. So it's heavily inspired by LSP, and it's worth people who are interested in history. It's worth going back a little bit, check what it is about, and come back here. Yeah.
absolutely right. I think LSP was a new knowledge for me also. But
Yeah.
what it taught me is if you have to simply explain MCP to somebody, it's a microservice of AI, right? It's
Yeah.
AI. If you want to build something on AI, you want to standardize that as a microservice in AI, this is what the standardization
Or
looks like.
or even for people who are not familiar with microservices, the most useful, one thing that stayed with me clearly is MCP as the USB-C for AI. The
Right.
universal connector for AI, which also makes a lot of sense for you to remember. Yeah.
Correct. Correct. Now, I think it's important to understand. Then people would ask question. I can write piece of code. I can expose it as a REST API. Why do I need a MCP? Right. That's the question that we'll answer next.
Hmm.
Um, so AI development before MCP was fragmented. How it is fragmented? Because, like I mentioned, the reason why I mentioned to you about the prompt template in my previous example is exactly same. You need a battle tested prompt for you to efficiently give out a response, and you cannot expect the consumer of AI, I mean, model to do that if you're building an application. So generally, you create a prompt template for something, and then you expect reply in that format. So you would have a lot of prompt logic, which will have a list of prompt template which you want to use in different use cases. That is one fragmentation. Next is tool calls. Again, going back to my example, I wanted to go to a website, read the documentation, come back, execute an Ansible script, which has to be pulled from a Docker repo somewhere. So this is a particular flow which we do manually currently, and I wanted to make it as a tool calling. Another example is you wanted to pull something from a PostgreSDB or a Snowflake or a Databricks. You want to get some data and then, format is massage it and then reply back using LLM. That is also a kind of a tool calling. So people started writing integration to different systems and pulling out data and maybe
Yeah.
executing it using some framework. That is also fragmented. So it's a different fragmentation of your enterprise integrations and then calling them. That's it. That's what is
Uh,
called as custom tool calls. Then custom data access. You could have resources which you wanted to provide it as part of your agentic workflow. Maybe it could be a summarization of your installation document. It could be some data formats. It could be some hand holding images or videos, which can be a local resources which you want to add to your tool. Now it's a vast area. Different people would build different AI models, and for each of these, people started writing custom logic, and they started bundling it in different formats. I mean, that's why it is called as
Even
fragmentation.
one thing to add here. I mean, going back to the same podcast from the creators of this, I mean, they face that challenge within Anthropic. Different teams doing really custom development for similar stuff. So that's one of the what drove them to create something common template. Yeah. So
Correct.
they same thing. We can see in our own inside wherever we are working, companies that we are working, everyone is writing custom prompt for a very similar work, right? Yeah, very similar data access.
Correct.
Yeah, it's good.
And this picture depicts what I told. People started writing logic for different integration. Somebody want to integrate to the data store. Somebody want to integrate to the CRM system, version control management, and then you talk to LLM. So this is how it wanted to standardize. Basically, MCP is a client server model. So if you, um, yeah, this is how it works actually. So you can write an MCP client which invokes an MCP server. MCP server will expose multiple tools, resources, and prompt templates for you, and it'll list down what you wanted to do. And interestingly, what I found also initially, I was also thinking the MCP clients are only Anthropic because it came from Anthropic. Then later I realized it's not. You can write an MCP client with OpenAI or any model, and it's an open standard. So what you need to worry is writing a proper MCP server, and the client can be built using any any model, and you could give an interactive experience of this.
Hmm.
But if you use like Cloud Desktop or any automated tool from Claude, the MCP client is already MCP compatible. So if you write an MCP server, integrate with them, they will list down your tools in your cloud desktop automatically because you have the adhere to the standards. It lists down. So that is the only reason many of the initial demos only had cloud desktop, but this training clearly indicates how you can write a custom LLM MCP client also. I think it's also important to look at how to write a client as important as writing an MCP server. So that is what it is. And here it is explaining what is a tool. It can be a retriever search, it can be a message sending, it can be a DB record update. Resources can be file records, API responses. Prompt templates are, like we discussed, different types of prompt templates, and it standardizes it. And one more beautiful thing which I found is um, there are two things. There are two
If
ways of
you
transfer.
go back to the previous screen a bit here, in a way that to make the explanation slightly to resonate with the people who never worked with it, people who only worked with LLM before, like ChatGPT, you ask ChatGPT on any of your questions, it has that pre-trained knowledge, the world knowledge, right? Any of these LLMs these days has the complete internet knowledge. And tool calling is nothing but, you give it access to an external tool. Other than its own pre-trained knowledge, you give it an external tool. For an example, simple calculator, right? You give that tool access, one calculator access to the LLM, right? So if you take the same example, you write an MCP server just for the calculator use, right? And here in the LLM now, if you say use calculator in natural language, it can go find the MCP server, get the tool, and use that tool to do anything, right? So we are extending the capability of the LLM. And this was not possible in the last 2 years. It was a little bit of tool call and whatnot. But now we are like really high potential to extend the capability. Now, when I was looking at it, this is the way I was going in my mind, like, what's the framework I use to understand MCP? But then resources start getting a little bit confusing. Tool, resource, the very subtle difference between these things, I guess, need to really play around to understand difference between what's inside the MCP server, right? Tools, resources, and the prompt templates. Prompt templates is even easier in a way for me, but resources may mean I need to play with it more. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Um, Moving on. So another learning for me is these protocols. There are two ways that servers can communicate. One is HTTP and SSE combination. One is streamable HTTP. And what I learned is this is a new protocol which is introduced lately, and this is not there with many. So people still use HTTP with SSE. SSE is
Mhm.
nothing but server side events. So it kind of gets you the events. I think it's an event driven architecture where all the events in the system would be triggered back, and streamer would protocol is much more capable of streaming it, maybe reducing the inference latency, and that's what they are aiming. Mostly, I feel this
Ah,
protocol segments is also evolving, and it will become much more mature in future. And
uh,
this is very eye-opening because if you look at people start, let's take an example of Humane, right? And they try to build conversational, hardware. And imagine this kind of protocols evolving and making it simplify solution for conversational interaction with applications. Then the possibilities are endless. The hardware level, right? You really don't need apps anymore. Everything is
mm,
conversational, right? And you are going to interact with some or the other MCP servers written by somebody, and it's going to give you the results in the way that you want it. I mean, the app is a restricted format, right? App is exactly an extension of a web page, but you're putting that in a mobile and calling it as an app. It still has a strict user interface where you have to click somewhere and enter something. But all of that is
mm,
going to go away, and if everything is going to be conversational, because I would want, let's say, um to understand weather. I talk to the conversational agent and ask for whether I might want it like a table format because I am
Yeah.
using it for something else. But you would want it in a jiffy, with an image, with something like raining and all, right? It's your call. And for that
The
reason,
concept of generative UI, right? I mean,
correct.
a year ago, I think it's Vercel V0 or some people came up or frame this generative UI concept. And then uh, even at least in enterprise, I haven't seen generative UI yet, but this is a very, what you said, app or a specific website has a strict UI. Now we are going to change it to live UI. Whatever you ask is the UI, right? Whatever you
Correct.
want. And it can connect from all these MCP servers, be it Google Drive or you're accessing Google Photos or a completely different service. It can all combine together as one in your interface, right?
Yep.
People can build amazing stuff, not tied to one particular service. Yeah. You saw the
Correct.
deep research
Yeah.
AI Deep Research now lets you connect to many services. It can deep research on your Teams, Outlook, Google Drive, and all that. And they also extended it to an MCP server, that one thing, which opens up connection to so many different possibilities, right? So any service
Correct.
can be extended like really broadly from now on.
Correct. And I feel it is fascinating and this is the right direction to go. And I always felt our user interfaces are very limiting. And even the technologies which we use as UI building, like JavaScripts, are extremely complicated packages, difficult to manage. So I think making it conversational should take away a lot of that burden, is what I feel. And these protocols would enhance it further.
Yeah,
But
here, no, it's while you are chatting with the LLMs, you can call, I mean, whatever the MCP server gives you, these additional tools you can ask in natural language, right? I mean,
correct,
that's kind of a key. Yeah.
correct.
And any LLM, doesn't matter which LLM, who it's open, that open protocol, open standard. So any LLM can talk to it. Yeah.
Another interesting, coming back to MCP, one thing I found is with the MCP code base, they are also helping us with an MCP inspector. It's a
So
very good tool. I found, the first question that even I had is, even if I develop MCP, how do I test it, right? Without LLM, I want to test it. And this is exactly what an MCP inspector will help you do. This does not need an LLM integration. It would just purely show your tools and resources and prompt templates and everything. And you could, you know, do fire the tool searches and get the responses and see what is happening exactly, timeouts and all that things. And it's a pretty basic, but I find it very good
But
because
nice. Like this helps anybody who builds an MCP server, right? Let's say
correct,
you want to build some service which can be used by any LLM, any client, anybody, any app builders, and your server is, let's say, very useful MCP server, useful set of tools anybody can use. E- Even before they build and use your MCP server, they can use MCP inspector to play
correct,
with it and may just understand what's your server is offering, right? And
correct,
while going through this course, I already saw there are people already 3,000 plus different MCP servers built by
yeah.
by the vendors or by various developers, right? So even before you start building something, you can go and check these 3,000 if it already somebody already covered it or not. Yeah.
So
Hmm.
in that angle, I wanted to bring in one more tool called as NA10. I'm not sure if you have used it. Uh,
I'm seeing N8 in my feed in X feed a lot, but I didn't take a look what it is.
Yeah, it's a no-code infrastructure, but like we mentioned, there are 7,000 MCP servers. You get N8 templates out of the web for every integration. So the same way the MCP servers are here, you can write it for Google Drive and Gmail and all. There are multiple integrated solutions in N8 template, which you can just pull the JSON and put it onto the infrastructure. it'll create the integration for you. So it's a no code interface. So
Okay.
if you're somebody who don't want to code, I think N8N is a very good tool, and it is very famous also. And looking at the inventory of how many templates are available on their website, I think a lot and lot people are using N8N. That's another thing that I think people should consider if you just want to do quickly prototype something, or maybe very basic integrations you can do there.
Like parallel to MCP, or what is it? Is it
I find it similar to MCP, but since it is a no-code infrastructure, it does not offer a
lot of flexibility?
standardization. It's not, there's no flexibility there. It's like you get a Google Drive box, you drag and drop that, then you get a Gmail box, you connect your Gmail to
Oh,
Google Drive, and you make it a Snowflake box. So you get pipelines. So let's say your workflow is you get an email, you wanted to take that email, dump it to Drive, and then enter the ID in Snowflake. So you put three boxes, connect it, and enter the access credentials for each of this. It creates an LLM workflow for you. In between, you can add an LLM and then maybe summarize your email, may create a document out of it and put it in database. So you can create all that workflows very easily using N8N ideally. But MCP by far is the best standardization of AI interaction that I've seen. I think this is a
and
great.
the thing is, everyone like Google, all the vendors are coming out with their own MCP servers, right? Which is
Correct.
also very interesting. Like everyone now comes up with an MCP server as well, along with whatever product they're releasing for LLMs to utilize, right?
Correct.
It's
Correct.
making it much easier. Because
Oh,
we mentioned Google, now we are also talking about agent to agent protocol, right? A to A.
A2A,
And
yeah.
differentiating between MCP and A to A is so far I haven't explored it much, but that will be one thing to explore. Yeah.
Correct. Correct. I think MCP with the high level abstraction like a server, which brings groups a lot of complicated, fragmented development thing. I think this is extremely popular because of that. And all that you have to do to create a MCP server is import the packages and mark your methods of tools and everything.
Yeah, and great MCP and
Yeah, pretty straightforward. And one more thing I found interesting is you can do whatever you're doing with MCP without having an MCP also. For example, if you use LangChain, you can mark your tool calling methods also, similar to MCP, and you can mark it as a tool, different methods, and maybe you can execute different things there. And then you can invoke a tool using LangChain also. So if you don't want to do any of this, you don't want to standardization, you can just plainly write a Python code, single file, import LangChain, embed your LLM, and then write your tools methods there, and then mark it as tools and invoke it, and then bundle it as a Docker and run it. So somewhere you want to run it, you can do that also. I did that initially for myself. So people still can do that. This is something which will help in enterprise grade solutions. Like,
yeah.
you're not building something small, and multiple people want to use it. And there are multiple tools that you want to bring together and create a very unique MCP server for you. Then creating
This
this is the way this makes sense.
amazing possibility even in enterprise. We have like tens or um, for sure more than 10 product teams working all over the place. If they start making it as the MCP as the USB for connecting each other, right, within an enterprise,
Correct.
imagine a lot of agents working together as an enterprise, right? I mean,
And that's the beauty of MCP client. I mean, the client can talk to multiple servers. So
yeah,
imagine that
some
you're
of the
building.
services should be servers, right? Some of
Correct.
the services for sure should be, yeah, servers. Yeah.
So it's similar to your microservice development, right? You might have a backend team, and in backend team, you might have Python team writing something in Python, somebody is writing in Go, somebody is writing something else. Eventually, everything comes and getting integrated as a REST API, and REST API is called by UI. It's the same thing. But here,
We
the
have
UI,
in our company, we have a huge doctors database. Yeah. It's used by various products within the company, right? So this doctors database for me is like one of the resources. It can be an MCP server as a resource plus a tool. Yeah. It can expose some, you give an ID of the doctor, it gives all the information about that doctor. A lot of product teams can use this MCP service, right? So
Correct.
this is do it
And
once.
you
Yeah.
remember the metadata server discussion, ages back when we had data mesh and all.
Ah,
Uh,
yes, yes.
so
This is really going to the data mesh concept, no?
yeah. So
Domain.
if you look at the resource, metadata servers could also be a resource using which you could identify, data about data and something
Yeah,
in your
it
systems.
becomes really meta and meta on
Yeah,
meta concept.
meta on
Yeah.
meta. Yeah. So I think this is interesting. I think where it will lead, which I'm also trying now, is um, I think your uniqueness in creating MCP client is where the value of this resides in enterprise level. If you're just writing an MCP server, it's good for you to open source it or maybe put it out there for people to use it. But I think
Open
what
source
may
within the company, right? Open source, an MCP server which is open within the scope of the enterprise. Yeah.
scope of the enterprise, it can be outside also. So I saw recently a marketing uh, stock marketing startup in India has open sourced one of their MCP servers.
Okay.
Look at GitHub, right? They have open source GitHub, and so you could pull that and you can run it. So
Mhm.
there are things like that. So for somebody who's open sourcing a code, open sourcing an MCP server, and people working on that, forking that, and creating their own interpretation of MCP server also can happen. So let's take an example of something on Kubernetes, and then it is getting open source. I fork it, I create my own interpretations, and I can build an entirely different product on top of it. So there are
Mhm.
possibilities like that also. But what I found interesting is, like I mentioned, the MCP client design, how you want to bring in multiple MCP servers together and integrate it with LLM and provide an integrated solution using LLM is very, very interesting. And that is
Interesting. And
something
then a question I remember, somebody asked these creators, how many MCP servers can you integrate at one point to this? Yeah. I forgot the answer. I think it's within under 100 or under 60. I forgot. Yeah. So there is also a kind of a limitation probably on how many different tools the LLMs can be exposed to. Mm.
correct, correct.
Interesting. Yeah.
But yeah, it's also now the question will come, right? All of this MCP integration comes
Yeah.
with your security questions, right? You are actually putting your
True.
credentials into all of these systems, and then
Yeah.
you're interacting with models. So now the question is how the configuration management, security, everything will come into
Yeah.
this.
A
So
huge ecosystem is again evolving on this MCP registry or whatnot.
correct, correct.
You see, somebody built a very creative MCP memory server. So you can
Uh,
use this MCP server as your memory, right? So there are amazing creative potentials to use this MCP server for anything and everything.
correct, correct.
Yeah.
So I think that's what I'm also exploring. We are also learning and wanted to build something around this and see. I'm basically trying to compare a very basic LangChain, LangGraph solution or having it with MCP server. What difference does it make? Where and all it is applicable? And those are all the areas that I'm trying to explore.
Yeah,
But
I think people exploring this should use, their own, take a use case, something you really like to build, and then explore each of these concepts, right?
correct,
LangChain, then go to LangGraph, use LangSmith, and then go use an MCP server. Some use case that you really like. I mean, one thing I'm exploring, the way I'm exploring is, I always look at a travel agent as an agent, to create an agent, it's a travel agent. Then it can have a lot of sub agents where a visa agent plus a passport agent plus a booking agent or a flight. So it can also work as too many different agents. They all come together to give you a plan, a travel plan, something like this. It's an easy thing to map in your head and like try all these technical stuff at the same time.
correct,
Yeah.
correct. I think. we are almost towards the end of this, but mostly by next time we would have done something around this, and then we can discuss what we have done, what is the impact of it, and etc. But it's an extremely important knowledge for you guys to have. I think we should start with lang chain. It is
Yeah.
extremely simple to understand and do a very basic tryout of it. Once you do that, learn about lang graph. I believe lang graph is extremely important if you're building agents, and then understand MCP server, because you can mix and match all of this, frameworks, and put it as an MCP server, and then deploy it out there. So this
Yeah.
is given at any given point of time. If you are interested in AI, you want to learn something, these are the three tools that you should learn: LangChain, LangGraph, and MCP servers, and then start building your tools around it.
Yeah, totally agree. If agents are the future, it looks like agents are the future, then MCP is equally important. Yeah.
Correct. So before we wind up, any final thoughts to add to today's episode?
No, exciting times when it comes to learning all these new things and the potential. We can see it's changing the future. Yeah.
Great. Um,
Anything from you? You want to add something?
no, I think my understanding of MCP was completely different before. Now, taking this course has helped me understand a lot of this. And now I can map a lot of things in my mind as an application in MCP, which is what I'm trying to do. Let's see
Yeah.
where it goes and how much of a value it adds. So with that, I think we are winding up today's session. Thank you for your time. We'll come back with more implementation details of MCP servers and mostly LangGraph related activities. But till that time, goodbye.
See you.